Alright everyone, welcome along. Troubles Tuesday. Time to look, carry on, and kind of draw a line under what we've gone through the last few weeks. Yeah, that whole piece of consolidation. In the last couple of weeks, we've kind of looked at some of the areas that we'll get into and that can really affect and impact the report production that you're doing. So we looked at things like bias and how that affects us. We looked at how we can use layers within Power BI to start to actually shape and build our report structures. But what else do we need to think about? How else can we circle those wagons? Before we go any further though, if you haven't already, why don't you take a moment to like and subscribe down below and support the channel. In terms of progress and the consolidation that we're talking about, really what we're trying to understand is actually what goes on within a Power BI environment, within a data environment, within a really good data culture. Because there's so much that you need to be thinking through. So we've got areas like the apps, so actually the consumption of your data and of the visuals that you're going to present. We've got things like the user experience. User experience and apps, they're things that you just don't hear normally discussed when we're talking about data analytics. But because a modern analytics platform is going to be consumed far in excess of any documentation that can be managed, because it should be continually improved, as we mentioned, you're going to find that you need to have the user experience be intuitive. It needs to be, I can kind of figure out, I need to do this, I need to do that. And then, yes, you will have to do some documentation. You better do some documentation. Have some sessions, familiarize people with what's going on. But the goal needs to always be, this needs to be something that does not need a PhD to understand. Okay. And then, of course, we've got the three main items, haven't we, really? So we've got like reports, dashboards, and of course, drill through detail pages, because details are key for everybody. Like, how do I get from my big high level view down to a specific, what's happening there, right? And that expansion and contraction of the scope needs to be, again, using your user experience head, putting that on and thinking, how can I make it as intuitive, easy to manage and handle as possible? Okay, so there's a lot that you've got to think through. What are we doing? Your data, okay? We need to be working through what ETL do we need to do? How are we going to extract, transform it, load it, combine it, refresh cycles for it? All of those things need to be done. And then once you've done that with your data and you've chunked it and you've bashed it and you've made it like pretty, you then need to start to combine it into information. So with modeling it into data models, forming the relationships so that we've got the facts and the dimension tables built and structured. And then lastly, we can start to overlay that insight layer to it. So what measures are there? What visualizations are you going to do? How are you going to use, again, your user experience hat you've got to wear to say, how can I allow and enable data exploration within my customer base? So when you are a data developer, you'll find there's so much constantly going on. There is never a moment when you can just sit there and just be like, just throw that in, because it's not just a throw that in and be done with it. It's a considered, thoughtful, need to be aware of where we're going all the time and why. It's not a job that's just way okay? There's a lot that goes into it. And one of the things that you need to remember, especially this is from a Power BI side, is Power BI will allow you to take data from multiple sources. So you're going to be pulling from lots of different sources, be it spreadsheets, CSVs, websites, SQL, and ERP systems that are out there. There's all sorts of other stuff as well. You're then going to structure that into something for a data storage. So you use your ETL to go from source to storage, okay? And that's where, you could use the Dataverse, anything else in Azure as well. So like ADLS Gen 2, Data Warehouse, Dataverse, as we've suggested. Data flows is a great part within Power BI to store your data. And of course, there are also the wider Power App, Power Platform data flows as well. Confusing name for the same thing. They're not quite the same, bit different. Okay? And those all come together into your data models. And then a data model or a data set, Power BI data set, can then go on and serve multiple reports across multiple apps that you can have many apps consuming data from a single data set. So then for you as your data team, it's about saying, how can we structure, manage and maintain and improve that one data set primarily? And we'll do little bits and pieces to refresh and update reports. And then because we've got lots of small reports, if it comes and someone says, I don't need that report no more, boss, get rid of it. Just gone. Okay. It becomes the case that those 1 or 2 report pages, we don't care about them. Okay. We care about the big data set. We care about that. That report, it's a report, took 5 minutes to build, gone. Next one, 10 minutes to build, gone. In for a month, get rid of it. That's how it becomes. The core capital, the business capital, the value point is the gold part, isn't it? The Power BI data set. So that's the goal, isn't it? We get these valuable data sets because all these reports that tie to different business functions are all referencing that same source of truth. There is no argument about that data anymore. That data is the source of truth. And that's why you have to make sure that you maintain and validate it properly. So that's a bit scary, isn't it? Right? So how does this all work? So this is the piece, isn't it? It gets to the point where if we look at where we've got 2 data sets, right, you have to think this through. So if we remember, our data set can be built up from data from multiple sources, going through multiple storage areas, different ETL scripting comes up. We build that Kimball schema in a data set. So we've got all the relationships that are going to be there. We've got a load of DAX measures that exist there so that the core insights are there. We've got the time intelligence that we need. We've got all the core components that we need there in that data set. And then a report is built on top of the data set. And a report can exist or can only connect to one data set. You need to remember that. Reports are a single data set. Okay. So what you've got then is, well, I've got that. And then what you used to do is say, well, I've got a report and a data set. I need to do another report. So I need to build a new data set to report to. Not with Power BI. Once you get into the mindset of doing this, that data set, it works for report 1, 2, 3, and 4, doesn't it? And then above reports, you've got dashboards. And this is where it goes. People go, I never worked out like this before. Dashboards, they're not something you have in Power BI Desktop. They're only in the service. And it's because in Power BI Desktop, a Power BI Desktop report is a Power BI Desktop report. It doesn't make sense to have 5 reports in terms of, it wouldn't flow. You're editing one report. But a dashboard allows you to take key elements from reports, plural. So in here you can see we've got this one with 4 reports linked into it. But also those reports don't have to tie to the same data set. Okay, so we could, in theory, have a Power BI workspace, right, and have reports 2, 3, 4, 5 in a different workspace to the data sets, and dashboard 2 in that workspace with them. Okay, wouldn't make sense to try and have a dashboard outside different workspace. You can't do it. It wouldn't make sense to do it, right? So the dashboard exists with the reports, but you've suddenly got a whole package that we can do the user experience with, that we can have the management. And from a customer experience perspective, they don't need to be aware that we're going through data sets 1 and data sets 2. All they need to know is that my finance report, my HR report, which might be report 5, and I might have my financial overview, I might have my sales report for report 3, and I might have me bonus report for report 4, all tying back to data set 1, which is our P&L sheet, something like that, like the main what's going on, the profit and loss, the ledger style of a report coming off the general ledger. You can do all sorts, or it could be our full master sales table. It could be, yeah, all of that will work for you. And that's the bit that is difficult for people to understand about Power BI, is that once you move into the service, all of this just comes naturally. And it's the biggest headache for people to come to it when I've been doing Power BI desktop. I build reports, I send them off to people, or I publish them, and I get people into them, and that's what they do. Right? But that's small thinking. Right? Once we get to talking about, I want enterprise thinking, we need to be looking at how are we deploying an app, how are we getting people into it, how are people able to explore, understand, and visualize the data in their own way. And that's the power. So what have you reckon then? Oh, it's a bit late. There's so much that goes on in the Power BI service that it's barely covered in a lot of the documentation, a lot of the stuff when you first start out and you're doing Power BI desktop just isn't there, right? But once you get into the service, you need to start to take advantage of what the service has to offer. Use the data flows instead of just using data pulled into your PBIX file, right? Copy and paste them out into data flows, right? And then change the table to be the data flow reference, right? It's little things, but because you've got that existing as a data flow, suddenly it can be reused by somebody else. And once you start to think in terms of how can I make something that's reusable and drive people to use the same sources, you'll find that all the threads start to come together. And suddenly your business is operating as a single entity as opposed to lots of departments doing things in isolation, because everything comes together around the data. So we'll come back next week. What we're going to do is we're going to look at the other side of this. So we'll push some more back into the buyer side and all that coming through. And then we'll start putting that to bed. And then we'll have one more week. And then after 21 weeks, I think that's it. We'll go to the next season of Tuppence Tuesday, or maybe something different. I haven't decided yet. So I hope you'll stick with us. Yeah. Don't forget, of course, if you haven't already, like and subscribe down below. Come back on Friday for something for the weekend. And have a great week. Stay safe. Ta-da.